Good morning, folks. Good to see you. So last week we told you that Vincent is flying off, and he's flying off on Tuesday to Rome, and so all the best there, Vince. We're going to miss you. And then also this morning we're saying goodbye to Jesse. Jesse was on stage with a saxophone. He's joining his parents at a new church plant, and I keep realizing other churches need our people. Other churches need our people. This morning we also had Sean on the electric guitar for the first time. That was great. So my title this morning is Time to Rest. Time to rest. So rest is not a four-letter word. It is, but in a good way. We need to seek and we need to find new ways of resting and of working from rest. I sat typing this, part of this section of this. I sat typing under a yellowwood tree overlooking the Tow River, looking or listening to the luries calling from the other side in the forest. And as I was about to feel guilty, I remembered God saw Nathaniel under the fig tree. And I thought maybe yellowwood also qualifies. So at work, but also at rest at the same time. And it's obviously not always possible. It's very seldom that it is possible, but sometimes it is. And then we need to seize those moments. We need to grab it. We need to be grateful for it. We need to delight ourselves now in those moments, and we need to thank God for them. There's a saying that some people are born great, others become great, and others have greatness thrust upon them. I'm not too sure. It sounds very Churchill-ish, but I don't know who said that. Some people are born restful. I think Tim, as an example for me, for somebody that's born restful, I've never seen Tim walk fast, never heard him talk fast, never seen him in a hurry. He's often late, but he's never late somehow. Other people learn how to become more and more restful. This weekend I had rest thrust upon me. I had diarrhea for 48 hours. And I had rest thrust upon me. Thing is, I become increasingly aware that more and more people are battling to live with some form of margin, some form of just some space. By margin, I mean the space between you and the abyss, the space between you and the wall, the space between you and the nervous breakdown. You know, when you know that you're battling with time margin. Today I'm talking about time and rest. It's time to rest. When your timing makes sense in your head and perhaps even on your device, but actually doesn't make sense at all. You know, when you're scheduled to go out of a meeting that is scheduled to end at 2, and you're also scheduled to pick up the children at school at 2, and you're also scheduled to drop Johnny at soccer at 2 from school, and Sarah at ballet at 2 from school, it makes sense. It all happens at 2. But try and do that in practice. It's just not possible. You see, we all have limits. We have different limits. But we are limited as people. Some run the comrades. Some do the park run. Some run a bath. Some just simply run a temperature. But everyone needs to rest. It's not a good but elusive concept. It's a great idea if only it was possible. It's critical for your well-being. It's critical for you to be restored to life. Has any of you ever run out of fuel, as in the stuff in your tank, fuel, literal, yeah. Some of my family do. So your diesel, your petrol, you've run out of fuel and your car started, and you came to a stuttering halt on the side of the road. And that happened basically because you never had time to fill your tank. I was too busy rushing off and doing things. So I'm not sure. You know, the irony of this is, I know that if you walk with me now and we start my vehicle, the engine, the petrol light is on. And I literally had to pray, Lord, I need to get to church. I don't have time to fuel up this morning. It would have been so ironic. But when we live without margin, when we live without time in some area of our lives, then that area, those areas quickly spin out of control, and suddenly the rest of life, the other aspects of your life, needs to somehow be put on pause or slightly neglected, if you want to use that word. For you, put on hold is probably a better word. Just put on hold. For you to go to that side, to that aspect, to try and go and fix that thing. Suddenly my time and my attention goes into the direction of the immediate crisis, the fuel crisis, the financial crisis, or my shaky marriage, or the teenagers, or whatever the case may be. All because I did not take the time to refuel. The time to whatever was needed. The problem is that life does not have a pause button. If anybody still has small-ish children in your home, anyone under 5, I would guess. If, God is perfect and creation is perfect. But if I could suggest something to God, I would suggest to him that toddlers would come with a remote and that sometimes we can pause them, sometimes we can mute them, and sometimes we can just, I don't know, put them to sleep. Bloop. Anyway, sorry, Lord. Where was I? Life does not come with a pause button. Okay, it's not going to happen. Stop praying for it. Okay? Life simply continues. And so while I'm trying to plug that hole, fix that crisis, life continues. While I'm trying to plug the hole which I've created because of my lack of time margin, my living without rest, because rest is all about managing time. Rest is all about managing your time. The terrible result is while I'm giving my attention to this specific area of need, I'm by default neglecting something else. I'm by default neglecting some other area. And soon something else turns pear-shaped on me. While I'm hitching a hike to the filling station to go and get that fuel, I missed the position that I wanted to apply for. That was, I couldn't stop to fuel up because I'm heading for this interview. Maybe if I'm going to be late for the interview, I'll definitely not get the job. Well, how's that working for you now? While I'm hitching that hike to the filling station, somebody else is closing the deal that I couldn't stop to fill the fuel for to get to that deal. So, well, I like to believe that by nature I'm a pretty organized person. Tanya semi agrees. When I find myself running around on the stage of my life, don't you hear what I'm not saying? I don't live a life in lights, but running around the stage of my life, and one of those, I used to kind of be amazed at that circus act with the guys spinning the plates. It's such a picture of life to me. And so when I start running around on the stage of my life spinning plates, and I realize that things are going pear-shaped, and I think, well, obviously, all I need to do is to run faster. When you look at that guy and you see that one plate in the corner going, whoa, whoa, you realize he needs to start running faster. And so in corporate life or in life, you start just running faster and running harder and putting in more hours and working later and doing extra and all the rest. And then when that doesn't quite work, you think, that's what they mean. Don't work harder, work smarter. So I start to run smarter. I'm not sure what that means, running smarter. But becoming more disciplined in doing things. And I realized when I still find that even running harder, running faster, running smarter, you still hear plates cracking somewhere on the back of your stage, that even though you try to be as disciplined as possible, you have to face the fact that there might just be some form of an underlying cause. An underlying cause that I could not simply just try and deal with my self-created symptoms more radically, more effectively. Was it possible that in spite of my attempts to be more effective, to be more disciplined, that I can still hear those plates crashing behind me, was because of somehow it might just be caused by something else, something called fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of not doing enough, fear of not earning enough, fear of not pleasing God enough, fear that my wife and my children might not have, fear that my children might not have the opportunity to go to horse riding lessons or something stupid that will aid absolutely nothing to their future. Or to university that might be helpful. Or that I might just be overlooked for some position. Fear of missing out on something in life. That's the big thing nowadays. Fear of missing out. The result is that so often we end up living without margin. No space left, no unaccounted for space in my diary, in my schedule, in my routine. In other words, no rest. No rest. Now, this scenario that I'm creating now is not even new to us, and so therefore it's definitely not new to God. You see, God knew that we would drift into that direction. The direction of just running harder and smarter and spinning more plates. And therefore, He had a solution in mind thousands of years ago. And so He put that in place. And so when He spoke to Moses and when He gave to Moses the Ten Commandments, He actually commanded His people, that's us, commanded His people to rest. And so once a week He said, there will be a Sabbath, and that will be a holy day for you, a day of rest. I'm not trying to come and enforce the Sabbath on you. I just want to show you that God wanted His people to rest, to trust Him. If you have a short memory span and you can remember about 5 words, then go with these 5. To rest is to trust. To rest is to trust. Trust Him. We trust Him that if we obey Him by resting in order to make much of Him, make Him our focus, then He will take care of day 7 on our behalf. And if we struggle with that concept, imagine if you were part of the Israelites and imagine the year of Jubilee. Leviticus 25. Verse 11 to 12. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows for itself, or harvest the untended vines. For it is a jubilee, and it is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the fields. So if we battle to rest, battle to find time to rest for one day a week, how are we going to cope with resting for a year? Rest, bottom line, is a trust issue. Do we live by faith, trusting in God, or do we live in fear in the what-ifs of life? Do we live in the what-ifs of life? Who has seen the movie Inside Out 2? Who has seen Inside Out 1? Let's start with Inside Out 1. Wonderful. Who has seen Inside Out 2? Even better. If you have children approaching their teens, watch Inside Out 2. It will give you incredible insight into what happens when anxiety arrives at the control box. I'll leave that there. Rest is a trust issue. Do we live by faith, trusting God, or do we live by fear, by the what-ifs of life, by what anxiety causes, all the possible what-ifs, all the possible scenarios? John wrote in 1 John 4:18, he said, perfect love drives out all fear. Now I can tell you, he might as well have written, but fear drives out all trust and rest. Fear and anxiety will likewise drive out trust and rest. Will we believe Jesus enough to believe this? Do we trust Jesus enough to believe this? Because as I've already mentioned, we all have limits. And just like your car, it comes with a limited fuel tank size. And you know what? Just like your car has a limited fuel tank size, so do you. But the amazing thing is your car also has a fuel gauge. And it also has a warning light, a fuel running lowness warning light. And it also normally, nowadays, have a buzzer to tell you that the warning light is on, that the gauge is low, that the tank is coming close to empty. You might even have a car that has an AI voice to tell you, turn into the nearest filling station now, you have 11 kilometers left, or whatever. But the thing is, with all of those things that we've had all of our lives while we had that car, we still rush past the next filling station in order to make it to. And so somehow in life, we tend to ignore the warning signals, the running on empties, the lights that come on, the buzzers in the back of our minds. We ignore the warning signs of life, and so we rush past the next resting station along the way in order to. See, the same guy that never had time for a date night, who could not afford to spend quality time with his wife, that guy suddenly finds time to pursue her once she moves out. Then he has time to open up his schedule. Then he has time to take her out for an evening. Then he can actually take her for a weekend. Then he takes off an entire week. Then he clears his schedule to win her back. The same guy who never had time to attend parents' watching day or a soccer game or a prize giving. Suddenly he makes time to rush over to the ER when he gets the phone call that his teenage daughter took an overdose of pills. Then he has hours and hours to spend in family therapy. The same guy who never had time to exercise, who never had time to go for regular checkups, he suddenly is able to change his schedule, but only once the chest pains becomes a full-blown heart attack. Now, all of those three examples sounds terribly cynical. But why don't we ensure that we put in the hours, the time on this side of the crisis, before there is a crisis, probably avoiding the crisis altogether, living, working from a place of rest. God wants you to be successful. He wants you to be blessed. He wants you to flourish, but not at all costs. He wants you to live life from a place of rest. Time enough to live the life that He died to give you. God did not give you and me life to be overwhelmed by it. God did not give me and you this life to be overwhelmed by it. He gave us life to live it in a celebration of Him, the giver of all good gifts. So here's a question for you. What is your most valuable commodity? What is the most valuable commodity that you have? I trust that by now, 20 minutes in, you realize that it's not money. It's not your fancy car with an AI voice. It is actually time. It's not something material. Time can never be replaced. You can never have last Tuesday back, however wonderful or however terrible it was. If you've seen the movie About Time, then good for you. If you haven't, then better not. Back to that. In fact, it is better for you. You see, Sean, I know, donates blood. I hope somebody else also does. I don't. It's not a theology, but if you donate blood, wonderful. Excellent. The reason why it's possible for Sean and others to donate blood is because your body can recreate blood. It can supplement or whatever, can make blood again. It can supplement your blood. It can top your tank up. Remember what I said about time? So this will be quite shocking. But it's better for you that somebody comes to you and asks you for a pint of your blood and then pours it out on the ground than to waste an hour of your time. As shocking as that may sound, and gory as well. Because you can still replace the blood, but the time is gone forever. The problem is that we only have 24 hours in every day. Now, God, in His creativity, in His creative wonder, in His power, created the universe. And He created all these planets and He placed them in orbit. And then He placed the earth in orbit around the sun to create our seasons, and He caused it to spin around its own axis at the same time, creating night and day. And He did all of that in His own wisdom, forgetting to keep in mind your 36-hour scheduled day, which is a problem. So now we can either kind of pray that God would redo creation, or that He would kind of slow down the orbit, or we can be wise and we can try and fit into His schedule for our lives. So let's look at a couple of verses from Psalm 90. Psalm 90 verse 2. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Verse 4. For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. 1,000 years in your sight is like a day that's just gone by, or a watch in the night. The length of our days is 70 years, or 80 if we have the strength. And so having built that kind of platform, verse 2, verse 4, verse 10, Psalmist continues in verse 12 and so he says, teach us therefore, Lord, teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain wisdom. Teach us to number our days aright, so that we may gain wisdom. Teach us how to use our time best. This is critical. And I want to add to those verses, these two verses from Acts 17. You've got those 26 and 27. From one man, He, God, made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth. Critical part. He determines the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. You thought you came to George because you liked the weather, or because of the low crime rate or whatever. But God determined the time set for you and the exact places where you should live. Why? God did this so that man would seek Him and perhaps reach out for Him and find Him, though He's not far from any one of us. So God is from everlasting to everlasting. We're not. God is from everlasting to everlasting. We're not. I know that we also have an afterlife. I get that part. But we are finite beings. We are mortal beings. Our days are numbered. Our days are, in fact, numbered by this very God that gave us life. And yet, we mostly live as if we are immortal, as if we will always come home to the ones we love, as if we will always come home to our spouses and our children, as if we will always have good health, as if we will always have our parents around. In other words, as if we will always have time to catch up. As if we will always have time to catch up on the things and on the people that actually matter to us, but that we just cannot get around to at this very moment. So we skip another filling station. We skip another resting place. As long as we live with this mindset, we will keep filling our diaries, keep filling our days and our weeks with things that we will drop immediately at the drop of a hat if we knew that we only had 6 months left to live. Can we have that video clip, please? Just think of that for a moment. What would you do before you watch this? What would you do if you only had 6 months left to live? Let's quickly listen to this. It's old. It's Leonardo Buscaglia, one of my favorites, but it's...
For love is now. The time to do is now, not tomorrow.
Let's come back to our question. What are the things that you would immediately change regarding your schedule, your diary, your routines, if you knew that you only had a couple of months left? If I knew I had a couple of months left, or if you knew you had a couple of months left, I think one of the first things we do is to kind of resign from work so that we can spend time with the family. Unfortunately, this is a hypothesis. You can't, okay? There's one thing you can't do. But I want to know what other adjustments you will make regarding time spent, regarding rest, time spent with loved ones, with your spouse, with your children, with your grandchildren, with your friends. Another question, what regrets do you not want when you're lying on your deathbed? Once you've identified those, the follow-up question is, so what can you do now to avoid ending up with those regrets? Remember, life is what is happening to you while you are making other plans. Plans towards one day when I have the time to. Remember also, as we said, that from one man God created every man and every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and He determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. Which means that God determines our days but also that He has a plan and a purpose for our very days. He has a kingdom purpose for us. He has a kingdom calling over our lives. So go home and go and do 3 things. Go and decide what you are called to. Because unless you know what you're called to, unless you know what you're going to say yes to or have said yes to, you don't know what to say no to. Unless you know what you're called to, other people will always be filling your diary, your days, your weeks, your years, and you will end up, surely, with regrets as the car of your life stutters to the end of the road or to the side of the road with an empty tank. Secondly, realize that you have limits. One of your limits is time. Start to live wisely with who and what you give your time to. Realize the value and the importance of rest. Thirdly, decide who and what and even who you have to cut from your schedule. What activities do you reduce? What activities do you cut altogether? What do you have to reschedule? What do you have to add in? What do you have to increase in your schedule? A great verse to ponder as you ask yourself what you should be cutting and what you should be adding to your schedule is this, just a phrase from Acts chapter 13, verse 36. It's funny that we find King David in Acts chapter 13. And it says, "For when David had served God's purposes in his own generation, he fell asleep." When David had fulfilled and served God's purposes in his generation, he fell asleep. What are God's purposes for you in your generation? What are the purposes that God created you for now? Why are you here now? If God determined the times set for you and the exact places where you should live, why are you here now? Let that be your decision-making criteria, because time is limited. And how will you choose to use your allotted time? Use your time and rest wisely. What are the purposes of God for you for today, for this week, for 2025? I can guarantee you that those purposes will only be accomplished from a place of rest. Amen.